Hi everyone and welcome. Thank you for joining us today. We're really excited to be here and I am personally very excited to be chairing this conversation panel that we're going to be leading. We've got some amazing people from across the UK and I division of Flutter. First off, I'm Rachel Morgan. I am Head of Engineering and Test for the Sky Bet and Gaming Data Tribe. And here today, we've got leaders from across the group. So we've got Liam Dunn, who is a Business Information Security Officer in SBG. We've got Sonia Lakito, a Delivery Manager from PPB. And we've got Rob Delaney, Delivery Manager from PPB. David Coleman, Portfolio Manager from PPB, and Ian Bainham, who's a Lead Data Engineer in the Data Tribe in Sky Bet and Gaming. We're all incredibly passionate about the subject of achieving that balance between delivering and maintaining the tech that we are so proud of, achieving that stability and making sure that our services and our customers are able to use the products that we are so passionate about building. Everyone here has got some amazing insights and some really interesting takes and top tips. So I am going to pass over to Liam in a second, but quickly, quick Q&A. It would be great to hear from people. So please, if you've got any questions or you've got any comments or any experiences that you would like to share, we would love to hear from you. They're going to be fed back throughout, but we've got some time at the end that we'll use to answer your questions. So, as I said, first off, I'm going to pass on to Liam.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Rachel. Truth be told, this is a brilliant opportunity for me. I love talking about this stuff because when we're talking about delivering and maintaining tech, we're driving to the absolute heart of good information security. We want to do that whole shift left thing. We're not the Department of No anymore. We're not sort of tacking security on the end. We're talking about the idea that tech is going to be brought online with a genuine plan to sort of keep it up to date, keep it maintained.
Someone's at the front door.
Sorry about that. We're live, clearly. So where was I? So yeah, the idea is that, you know, we're talking about the absolute sort of core principles of good information security. We're talking about asset management. We're talking about knowing exactly what you've got, where it exists on the network, being able to communicate with it effectively, making sure that you can vulnerability scan it and address those sort of vulnerabilities as part of your normal patching cycle. Now, I'm not sort of blind to the fact that this all needs resourcing and we need to sort of maintain the motivation, because a lot of my engineering colleagues, they're going to get excited about the new stuff. So I guess what I should do at this point is sort of just to say, you know, I want everybody to be looking at delivering and maintaining tech, having plans to sort of sunset it, decommission it, all of that good stuff. But I want to hear from my colleagues now about how they maintain motivation around doing all of that sort of patching and vulnerability management, about doing all of the sort of configuration and administration, because I get that it's not as exciting. So I'll shut up for a minute and maybe somebody else can chip in.
So I guess it's like you say, it's a difficult one to sell, right? Because it's not the glamorous development work that development teams specifically want to be doing, but there's huge value in it, right? And I think more than asking us how we can do it, I guess the question is how we can do that together, because we don't want security to say and we to do with this stuff. We want to be working together to put this stuff together. To your point about security and dev teams working together at the start, I think that's really important. I think, let's say with the legacy approach to this kind of thing, it's very much an email from someone in tech saying, or from security saying, you've got some deployments here that need to be refreshed. Can you go and do these, please? But I guess looking to a more future focused balance, because that's where we are. We want to say, okay, so how can we better automate that process, right?
Yes. I think one of the things that that Liam touches is also very important about the motivation part. I think that is the part that for me is the sensible point, because as you said, people don't want to keep. This is not the sexy work for our teams to do. It's not that that's something that I really want to be working at that company because they have security patches to deploy. No one wants that. So going through automation on this is, for me, it's the right way to go. So it's having this kind of deployment and this kind of maintenance being the what we call monkey work being done by monkeys, robots, something that could actually automate towards to avoid having us humans doing this kind of work. While we are not there, and this is for me, it's a topic that we still need to work around this, and there is no okay, we are there, if we find the right balance. So while we are not there, there are some things that we should work towards to that. So sometimes I think also is very difficult in terms of the capacity management of the teams, is to find the sweet spots, how can I reserve time to do these patches from security or other areas? How can I reserve the time to do this maintenance work and at the same time invest on the automation? So for me, it's also here to find the balance, not only about delivering new features to the product, but actually seeing these automation as new features for the product, and not just because they are not just affected directly our customers, but in a certain way they are. And that's the part that I think we should also focus on, the selling part, on show everyone why this work is also important for us. So I would say that is my way of thinking on the automation.
Yeah, because if it doesn't get maintained, you're more frequently going to have incidents. So, and as you said, that there's a bit of, within a team, if you're trying to deliver on new features and you're maintaining tech and you're patching, it puts a lot of teams under a lot of pressure. So yes, you need the capacity there. You need to be able to look at how you address that and how you split that team up, because you don't want the same person that is constantly patching all the software. You don't want the same people that are delivering, because you create a disconnect and a divide between the teams. You're not able to skill up half your team members because one's dealing with old tech, one's dealing with new tech. So it's finding that balance on top of the capacity as well. I think from a capacity perspective, you've got, if you start putting too much pressure on, and I think one of the points around, if you have a lot of systems to look after and you don't have enough people, it does also put teams under pressure from that perspective as well.
I think there's also something to be said about the mindset around kind of security requirements when it comes to kind of maintenance. There's a collective responsibility for everyone, from the developers to right up to the senior leadership, to understand what the requirements are, to bake them into the design process, for it not to be a us versus them. Things that are tacked on the end. It needs to be something that we build for from the outset, and that we go after because it's in our collective interest to do so. So no, I absolutely agree with what you were saying, Liam, around, it's not something just to tack on the end. It's something that through working together, you build for, you design for, and you look to automate and minimize the kind of overhead that it generates, and share the burden amongst the teams so that everyone, takes ownership collectively and gets to work on both the new and the maintenance. And again, kind of strike that right balance between the two.
Sometimes when we are in this discussion, we can actually see that usually on the text perspective, it seems like there's a barrier sometimes in some companies where you can't. It seems that these two areas can talk with each other, and they are working towards a different things. So this is also a way for bringing everyone together, just to understand, okay, this is what we want to deliver to our customers. This is the value, the immediate value that you can see, and you can touch it almost. But there is other parts that you also need to address. For example, you probably are going to have more than one tech approach on the table. So what is the best tech approach? What is the pros and cons on each tech approach that you are going to decide? So is this part of the having this balance. For me, it's also having this communication and having those conversations. And sometimes it seems that it could happen that in some teams or in some companies where you can't have that conversation because no one is tech on the other side, and it's like there's the other side. So and no one is they don't have the tech expertise. So why do I bother to explain to them what we are doing and what we are trying to achieve? And this is already the wrong mindset. You are assuming that people from the other side won't understand what you are trying to say, but everyone is working towards a better product. And this is the product. It's not only the new features, it's the maintenance, it's all these components belong to the product. So that is the conversation for me that I learned through working in different teams, that I learned that this needs to happen. This conversation needs to be on the table, and we need to assume that everyone is going to understand, even if there is a different way of explaining things, because there are different levels of knowledge on the tech side, but it's not a matter of not having the conversation at all. We should have it.
Well, this is all music to my ears, and I swear I'm not paying my colleagues to say these lovely security positive things. I mean, what you were saying just there, though, Sonia, about sort of weighing up pros and cons, I hear those words and I think along the lines of the sort of balancing the risk associated with tech debt and risk management more generally. The idea at sort of maintaining your tech is sort of constant risk mitigation. It's proactively engaging in risk mitigation, and I genuinely believe that the way in which sort of modern businesses should deal with sort of information security in particular, but other areas of the business is very much around sort of risk management. Anyone I would think who's been in work in the last few years will remember sort of, those big stop-start projects like migrating off of Windows 7 onto Windows 10, that big hardware refresh. I mean, that's horrible. That should have been done much more gradually and much more sensibly. We had something similar when we moved off of Rancher, I think, where there was a sort of a migration away from Rancher onto more modern sort of orchestration type tooling. I can see, because at the end of the day I'm not actually doing the work, but I can see a need to try and have plans and to sort of think in advance about when we're going to decommission this stuff. But how does that work in reality? I mean, how often does somebody come up into a sprint planning session and talk about, we're going to stop developing a new cool thing in order to do some maintenance? How do you guys actually sort of build that into part of your BAU activities?
That's the question, isn't it? I mean, that's a conversation that we have, I imagine, all of us on this call every week. It's a hard thing to sell, because ultimately the conversation that I'm going to have as a delivery manager is with my customer to say, hey, the feature that you want built, that's going to probably be a little late because we have to build in some security concerns, or we have to do, some infrastructure things. It's a trust thing, I think. If your customer trusts you enough to make the right decisions around balancing the technical ask from other teams versus the actual ask for them, and knowing that, at the end of the day, they're going to get the product that they want, then they'll trust you enough to be able to say, hey, I need to stop for a week, or, I need to pull someone off to go and do this for a little while. But I guess it's just about being open and honest for me, and not trying to hide that stuff. I think that's really important.
Absolutely agree. Transparency on this kind of stuff, having honest conversations around what it is, and recognizing that you're protecting your investment, right? Even though it's maintenance work, you're protecting the value that you've created, which arguably is equally as important as creating new value, driving new product, is protecting what you have and your customer experience as it is today. So yeah, absolutely. It shouldn't be viewed as a negative. It's the cost of doing business. It's, I guess the question is, how do we minimize it? How do we maximize our ability to do new product without exposing ourselves to risk?
About the decommission, I also think that once again, and I'm touching on this point again, but the selling point. So when we are talking, let's decommission a component, usually this is straightforward for the tech area, that, okay, we know that why we need to do this, but usually don't take time to show to an entity and to show to the company how much hours are we going to save by not having to maintain this component, how much capacity are we going to gain for focus on new features and new components. And this is a way of showing the perspective that we are actually having some metrics that we can use to plan this work and have the right sponsorship for this type of work, and we don't have to hide it. We may achieve to some point that we have to say that we cannot keep creating new components because we don't have enough capacity to support them. And this is also for me a sign that we also may need to scale the area and reorganize the way that the teams are structured and the components are structured. So this is a metric for me that it's always the component versus developer or team member. It's a metric that it's a sign of many things. It could be a sign that the team may need to scale. It could be a sign that we need to decommission some components. But if you need to put effort to sell that, to explain better why we need to do this. What are we gaining when doing this? And this is something that I've been finding very useful on my reality at the moment. Yeah.
So I think it's a return on investment thing, right? So for those of you probably don't know, but my previous career was in sales. So I've gone sales and into technology, and it's really interesting to see that even though I thought I was leaving my sales career behind, I work in customer service, even though I'm a delivery manager. And I think that's the really important thing to bear in mind when you're trying to have these conversations. So we as a technology team and technologists, when we are having conversations about components that we want to decommission, the benefit to us is obvious. There's a cost investment, for supporting these things, for maintaining these things over time, because like it or not, if it sits there, you will eventually have to put your hand in it and do something with it. But it's about showing the return on investment to your customer to say, we own this component, we have a better way of doing this. The return on investment for you will be that we're not looking at this as often as we are. Plus, we're going to, let's say, fold it into another piece of work that we're doing over here. So we are reducing our, it's about having the conversation to show that value in terms that your customer is going to understand, in non-technology terms, essentially.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you it's a bit of a loaded question, but here we go. So, I mean, what we're talking about here, what Sonia's talking about, what you're talking about, Robert, it's essentially introducing an element of commercial awareness into everyday activities, isn't it? We're sort of saying, look, the maintenance of our technology is something that is important to the business. It has value, but maintenance activities quite often are seen as sort of detractors. They don't generate profit, so to speak. So how do you have those conversations? Who's responsible for having those conversations? I mean, we're sort of on this call and we've been sort of, if you like, marketed as thought leaders. And I'd argue personally that actually, commercial awareness benefits everybody, whether you're sort of customer services, engineering, development, whatever. And I think being aware of the technology that you're using and the state that it's in and everything else along those lines is almost part of your responsibility, because if there's something that you can see at the level in which you're working and you're not comfortable or confident that your leadership's actually cognizant of the fact that maybe this thing is end of life or this thing needs sort of fixing, it's kind of responsibilities on you to have those conversations. But do you guys agree?
Yeah, so if from an engineering perspective, I mean, if you were to look at a new feature or a new product, you start with the requirements gathering. So you're starting with the end and what you're expecting at the very end. You then move back from there and size it up, but you're not taking into account any of the old technology because you're looking from a current point in time and looking at what you're building on an existing system. You're not looking at what's actually powering behind that. If you need to make any changes to any old equipment, if there's any maintenance that needs to go on from a security perspective, none of that actually gets factored in to the timescales from the initial timescales, because all you're looking at is from a current point in time to to your requirements and to your product. I think more back to the honest conversations. I think before you can actually start to size up how big a project is, you need to have all of those conversations and factor in security, factor in how much maintenance needs to go on in the background, but also within the team, the people that are going to work on it. So if, for example, you have a feature and you've got 2 engineers working on it, is that enough? Do you need more people? Do you need people on the back end as well as the front end? So yeah, I think from an engineering perspective, there's quite a bit more that could be done around that.
I think from a portfolio perspective, the same is true. You know, kind of in the theme of honest conversations. In order to have those conversations, you have to have something some data to prove it, to demonstrate that this is the amount of time that we're dedicating to supporting all of these legacy components. And as a portfolio manager who looks over hundreds of in-flight projects at any given time, you add up all of these hours across all of these development teams across the business, and you're talking significant investment being made annually on managing operational overhead and legacy components. And you can easily convert that into pound sterling. And that's the conversation that you can have with the commercial teams around, this is how much we're spending to manage these legacy components. This is what the difference would be if we were to consolidate this system, remove complexity from our estate. And that's the language that, that they will get behind very quickly, because it also supports the stability of their products, the customer experience, their ability to kind of stay competitive in the market. So absolutely, to answer your question, Liam, I think maybe, yes, there is translation needed, but the responsibility actually sits with our technologists to surface what's happening, and our kind of business functions to kind of translate that and use that and then act on it.
So, I mean, that's all really good stuff. I suppose that the question is where's the tipping point? If we think about, here's a thing that we're using, here's a thing that needs maintenance. We've looked at it from the point of view of, if you like, risk management and risk appetite. At what point do we sort of turn around and say, that's enough? This thing needs to change. This thing needs sunsetting. This thing needs sort of moving off. Do we sort of rely on vendors to tell us when a thing is out of support, or do we look at feature sets, or is it about the sort of product features of the business that we want? How do you make those calls?
I think the answer to that is there isn't an answer to that. That it's right, we have such complex tech estates and different product verticals across multiple geographies and so forth, that there is no one answer. But there's lots of things that we can do to try and manage it effectively on an ongoing basis, because I don't think you can ever solve it, but it's something that you just try to keep track of and not allow to become excessive and kind of be detrimental to your ability to be competitive, to offer good products and kind of grow as a company.
But I think the tipping point can also come from anywhere. For example, it can come from a one-on-one that you are having with someone in your team. So, and that to say that the responsibility is not about the manager or the product owner or the portfolio manager, it's about everyone. Each individual contributor are responsible for this. So, and as an example, in my team, most of the times actually is my engineers that are saying we need to decommission this because this and this, and then we start a conversation there just for me to support my team on selling this better, because I know the better what the company looks for in terms of metrics, for example. So I use some data to support what we already know, but then is the part of creating the story here, do the storytelling and do the creative parts to let's pick this data, let's pick on what people already is telling us, and that each person is already seeing the obvious, and let's work this around. Sometimes there's the vendor, and to answer your question, Liam, I think all the above will also be an answer. Sometimes we have the vendor saying, okay, this is going to be, we are going to stop maintaining this version in November. Okay, so we have a strict deadline here, and we need to cope with that. But other times is actually we are our own vendors, and we are the ones saying, no, we are not supporting this API version anymore. and this is kind of the where I sit in terms of being a delivery manager in the platform side. I usually have a lot of these conversations because I have my clients inside the other components inside the company, and I also have my providers. So I usually have to be on this constantly negotiation, and usually my problem is the lack of capacity to handle everything. So when I'm at a point that the number of components and the amount of work that we need to do is way higher, and I have already a backlog, and this is another tipping point. The backlog is enormous. So the backlog, I could close the team for 1 year and we would have work in terms of maintenance. It's already a red flag. This is already something that should not be happening, and we need to work around that. So this was something that already happened to me in the past, and we have to put actions in place. So there's a lot of tipping points around you. We just need to open your eyes. I would say that.
There's lots of inputs into that conversation, I think, and not to draw out what you guys have been saying already. But the really important piece is putting it in language that your customer understands. So there's two really important things. One is cost of maintenance and support. And we all know for older applications, there is a cost in there, and that's tangible. And you can probably just count your support tickets to figure out how much that cost you. But the other cost is, what does it cost you if you don't have it? So, ultimately, if you're talking about a component that's for a high profile sport, if you lose that component and you can't trade the sport for half an hour, what does that cost you? And that's another really important factor to feed in when you're having those conversations, because we all know over time that we do our best to, some of the really older stuff that we've had in the past, we have just kept it going. And I think it's really important to show, okay, sport X was down for half an hour, here is the tangible cost, and we can tell you in the future that if we don't replace this component, that tangible cost will repeat over time, and therefore that's what it's going to cost you a year to own that. It's about putting it in language that your customer understands, just to make the point I was making earlier.
And when from experience, it's really easy to be reactive to components failing and kind of taking action off the back of that. What kind of things would you suggest to help people to be proactive about managing that balance on an ongoing basis, instead of waiting for things to go wrong and fail and incurring that cost? How do they get in front of it, prevent that from happening?
Yeah, so I think to briefly tell you the story of our department at a very high level. So I joined Paddy Power, as it was back then, and we didn't have technology function. We reported directly into trading, and that way back in the bad old days, it was, I have a problem, can you build me something to solve the problem? Absolutely, I'll solve your problem. And at the time that was great, but obviously, as we've grown as an organization, that approach can't and doesn't scale anymore. And so where we find ourselves now with those types of conversations is, I don't want to solve this one problem for you here. I want to understand the need behind the problem that you're describing. I want to understand where that need manifests across trading as an organization, and I want to understand how I can build you something that will solve that problem for everybody who has that problem, not just you specifically in racing or you in football. That's where we are now, thankfully, as a trading function. We don't, we get requirements, and quite often we'll go back and say, okay, so we understand that you want to build a particular market, or you want to do a particular, trade in a particular way, but actually, probably 7 of your colleagues probably want to do the same thing. So how can we build you something here that all of you can use that will ultimately, what that does is solves a bunch of problems for people. But over time, you then are reducing down your legacy estate, because you have, where you would have had 7 or 8 platforms to do the same thing in the past, now you might only have 1 or 2, and therefore the cost of ownership is all that has reduced. And therefore, when your customer comes to you and says, I have an idea, you haven't got that massive cost of ownership that you potentially had in the past, and you have that kind of leeway to investigate into new things and innovate in new things.
And we can also have that from the other initiatives. For example, we shouldn't wait for someone to tell us what to do. We are not there in terms of engineering team. We are not there just to do the maintenance or do the work that someone asks us. So it's important that we give space for people to also bring their own proposals and bring their own ideas, because sometimes the teams are in the right spot to understand better what they need to do to have this system more scalable, as Robert was saying. So I think giving that space to the teams, and that could be, for example, on our case, we have innovation days, we have AQUICs, that could be ways of promoting this innovation and promoting these ideas that could not be too big, or it could actually be, because there's limited days to promote this, but I think it's already helpful, because we are seeing some things happening that could reduce, especially this maintenance, and could improve our systems in terms of scalability, so that we don't end in the scenario that Robert had a few years ago.
I think for me, the thing that's most encouraging about this whole conversation is that nobody's talking about sort of compliance in the terms of, GDPR, PCI, SOX, any of that sort of stuff. Nobody's saying we have to maintain this stuff in order to continue trading, in order to continue being licensed. Nobody's saying that we do this because we have to. We're saying, actually, we're doing it because it's the right thing to do. We're doing it because it reduces friction. We're doing it because it speeds delivery. We're doing it because it's the best thing to do for the business. And I love that sort of stuff, because it means that, we're baking in security. We're not even necessarily talking about it in security context. We're saying that we're doing it because from an engineering standpoint, from a product standpoint, from a delivery standpoint, this is the right thing to do in order to reduce our effort later on. And I think that's my takeaway from this. It's really good to hear.
I'm conscious of the time, and we said we would leave some for Q&A. I haven't received any questions, so I don't know if that's because we haven't had any. But if we do, we'll make sure that we still have some time. So if there's anybody who's listening, who's on the fence about asking any questions or making any comments, please do. We'd love to hear from you. And with that in mind, then we'll just keep going for a bit longer. If there's anybody on this in this group who wants to ask any more questions, I think there's been some really good chat so far. Any questions that we want to ask each other? It's been some really good top tips so far. It seems to me like discussing the balance is really important. Understanding the balance with that data, which is music to my ears, seems to appear in quite a lot of our assessments. It's good to hear that. And it's about kind of risk mitigation, but it's coming from a really positive place, as in we're doing it because we really care about what we're looking after.
I know we mentioned we wanted to specifically maybe mention some top tips each. I don't know if you folks have any of those written down.
Yeah, from my side as a portfolio manager, definitely. I guess the key message would be, don't view maintenance work as a negative. It's only negative when it gets excessive. Bake it into your technology strategy. It's business critical. And you will only have a good balance if you keep working at it. It's not something that will happen organically. So build it into your strategy, be honest about it, get data to drive the right conversations, and work at it. And that will yield benefits for the business in a significant way.
I think from an engineering, I think it's more to try and avoid creating a single point of failure, especially when dealing with older tech. Creating a balanced team, that is focused on the new technology and the deliverables, but upskilling from the legacy experts within the team so that they have an all-round view of what's going on and being able to maintain. It just creates more of a balanced team, and it also means that people are interchangeable. So if you are dealing with incidents, you're not relying on just one or two individuals within a team. If you are having to maintain and patch software, you're not relying on one or two individuals. You're not using those taking those individuals away from key deliverables that may be going on. So it's about creating that balance and structure to be able to engineer effectively.
I have a question. Elliot has asked us, how do engineering and design embed customer perspectives into products and services you build? It would be really great, I think, if we could hear from David first on that.
So can you ask the question again, Rachel, just so that I'm...
Yeah, so it's how do engineering and design embed customer perspectives into the products and services you build?
So when you're creating kind of new products, there's a vast amount of research that's done up front before investment approval is given by the senior management in terms of, yes, we're going to go off and build this. They're doing customer research, they're reaching out to customers, they're sentiment surveys, A/B testing, kind of running prototypes. It's very rarely done blindly, and that's because the investment required to build the new products is significant, right? So they definitely want to look before they leap. So I would say a lot of time and structure and kind of expertise around understanding our customers, understanding what they want, doing early and fast iterative testing of new ideas and product development is kind of the way that certainly within our business that we look at doing it, rather than a kind of big bang approach of here's this brand new product idea with all these features, we hope you like it, and I guess we'll find out soon, which could go catastrophically wrong. So it's more of a test and learn, stay close to customers, gather what data we can, and use that to guide our product development.
I think, like, from a technology perspective, what we tried to do over the past couple of years is build applications to enable that. So, if traders want to do kind of A/B testing, how do they do that without investing 2 months of work up front to build something like that? And we've tried to build certain components and platforms for the trading teams over the past couple of years and enable them to do that. So.
I've got another question. Thank you for your answers, Rob and David. On that one, it's from Patrick, and the question is, PPB team, you touched earlier on the hard deadlines for third-party versus internal deadlines. In your experience, what are the best tips and common pitfalls you have found when communicating life cycle expectations internally?
Maybe I can pick that one. So, actually something that at some point we tried and it seems to be working. I'm not saying, I think that would work more a quick fix than for actually the long-term solution, but having an allocation agreement. So for example, in my sprints at the moment, I have 20% of allocation for tech maintenance, and this is how it was previously agreed because there was backlog that sustained those 20%. This was previously agreed in order for us to make sure that when we are committing with new features to the product, we are already taking consideration that at least 20% should not be used for that commitment. So we already are taking that in consideration. I'm not saying that the 20% is the perfect fit, or if it's more or if it's less. Actually, to be, for my point of view, it shouldn't be that strict. It should be something more mixed up. But this was a quick fix for us in order to make sure that we have the space right now just to gain some time to fix this with more automation and with some decommission plans. So it's to tackle a few things that we weren't able to tackle so far. So this was a kind of an agreement. So once again, having the conversation, I think we would help on this scenario. So we don't have to wait for a date, and when there is an internal date or you are doing a commitment, it's a commitment that came from the team, I would assume. So the team should be aware of the roadmap and everything that is on the table to make this commitment, and you should try to reserve the space for any type of incident that may appear. So with this type of buffer, that it's important to be there. Not sure what the exact amount. Once again, 20% it seems to be working. It's not solving the role, but it seems to be a good way to start.
From a portfolio management point of view, the kind of deadlines, certainly external deadlines, they're kind of risk assessed. Right? So let's say that a component is going out of support. Well, what does that component support? what happens if it stops working? What happens? What do we, how much is it going to cost us if we do need support when we've gone out of our support kind of period? And that's how, that would influence how we work to that deadline. And that's quite different, say, if it's a deadline set by a regulator where we risk losing our license to operate. Well, that's a pretty hard deadline, and no way there's any kind of wiggle room there. So I think it's context sensitive, but it's about risk assessment towards being able to serve our customers, to provide a good service, and so forth.
Is there anybody wider? So Ian, Liam, anything that you'd like to say on that question at all? Or Rob, I don't know.
One feels a bit outside of my wheelhouse, so I'll let Ian with that one. Sorry.
It's a difficult one to answer, because I think we do, I'd say, quite well within SBG with being able to balance some of that anyway. I think based on Sonia's view there, 20% does seem like a good enough figure to be able to look after that. But I mean, if I'm looking from within engineering and specifically from our team, a lot of the stuff that we have is upstream of us anyway. So we do put a lot into the maintenance that we do within the team. It's looking at where we could potentially look at other areas that we could actually help improve, and maybe, I don't know, maybe 20% is good enough. There will still, I know we don't have as much tech debt as a lot of the other teams, so I don't know if 20 would work for them.
Yeah, I guess, like, just to David's point, it is context sensitive, and I don't think there's any kind of hard and fast rules that you can apply to any of this stuff. It depends, like, how you approach this stuff. Just to my point earlier, though, I think the really important thing is to have these conversations out in the open. So allow your stakeholders to understand the impact of everything that's going on with you, because it's very easy for you as a technical team to, like, we're a dev team, we're having conversations about infrastructure, but are we having the conversation back with our commercial stakeholders to say we're having these conversations, and that actually that might impact some of our delivery dates. So it's just, I would say, top tip for me is just keep everyone in the loop, be open and honest about this stuff, and make sure everyone is informed and you're making decisions about this stuff together, not in isolation.
I think that is the perfect end to this panel, that note of working together. I think that's wonderful. So with that, thank you so much to everybody that has joined us today. It's been really great to have some questions, and I hope that you have taken away something from this. We're all, I think, on LinkedIn, and I don't think anybody on this panel would mind if people wanted to approach us outside of this call. We're all passionate about tech and this balance, and continuing to strike the balance between maintaining and delivering tech. So thank you so much. I hope you all have a good afternoon.
Thank you.